Hey there, my name is Joost Rietveld, and today I'm excited to present ongoing work together with Richard Haans. Our paper studies the mediating role of information intermediaries, such as expert critics or award bodies, between producers and consumers, in markets where consumers may experience difficulties in evaluating products prior to consuming them. Information intermediaries play a crucial role in these markets by helping consumers discover and make sense of new product offerings. And one specific way they do this is by drawing comparisons to prior products in their evaluations of a focal product. Here are some examples from different industries. In a review for the video game Strafe, the critic makes the comparison to another video game, Devil Daggers, by specifically focusing on the use of sound. In a review of the pop star The Weeknd's new album Dawn FM, Candace McDuffie notes that Dawn FM isn't quite what Thriller was for Michael Jackson, but a solid effort nonetheless. In his review of the movie The Woman King, Robert Daniel draws comparisons to Gladiator and Braveheart as similarly epic movies. And finally, in his review of the cooking app Chefling, Gabriel Zamora points out the similarity with another cooking app, Yumly. Such comparisons are commonplace and may have an important impact on the critic's overall evaluation, as well as on how consumers perceive the products being evaluated. Yet we know very little about this phenomenon and its implications for firm performance and positioning. In our study, we aim to address this gap by asking the following research questions. First, we want to know which products are being compared by evaluators. On the one hand, it could be argued that comparisons are most fitting for highly novel products, but it is also less likely that there exists a suitable referent for such innovative products. On the other hand, it could be argued that products that retreat common ground do not necessitate a comparison, given how similar they are to prior products. Second, we are interested in which products are selected as the referent when a comparison is made. It may be that reviewers have close or direct rivals on top of their mind when they're evaluating a product. Or they might hark back to more distal offerings that can be considered exemplars or best-in-class offerings. We observed both in the examples just given. Third, we'd like to know what the implications are of being compared for the focal product's evaluation and ultimately for its performance in the market. Comparisons may help a focal product co-opt some of the legitimacy of the referent by being seen as similar. But this could also backfire if the referent is best in class and the focal product is perceived as inferior. We explore these dynamics in the context of digital PC games released on Steam. Steam is the market-leading distribution platform for digital PC games. More than 10,000 games were released on the platform during our study's timeframe from 2005 to 2016. We collected granular data on a game's tags as submitted by the commercializing publisher when uploading a game onto the platform. Each game can have up to 20 tags out of a total of 390. These tags identify and categorize a product by describing its features, aesthetics, and its overall vibe, if you will. We use a game's tag vector to understand how similar or how distinct it is to other games on the platform. We also collected data on game reviews from two leading websites in this space, GameSpot and IGN. We collected expert reviews written up to 2020 because it might take some time before an older game is compared to a newer one. There are more than 4,600 reviews in our sample, and roughly 1 in 5 reviews contain a mention to a prior video game. Here is another example of such a mention, where the game QUBE or Cube is compared to Portal. The reviewer writes, "Portal succeeds in building an engaging and humorous world, whereas Cube feels like the video game equivalent of doing homework." Not quite a glowing endorsement, considering the target audience for these products. We use our rich data to conduct 4 sets of analyses. First, to better understand which games get compared, we estimate a probit regression with selection correction at the game level. We correct for the fact that not all games are reviewed, and that a review is required to be compared. Our outcome measure is whether a focal game is compared to any prior game in a review. On the right-hand side, we control for novelty as measured by whether a video game is based on an entirely new intellectual property. We control for a game's distinctiveness relative to other games on the platform as captured by its tag factor. We control for whether a game spans multiple genres rather than being squarely positioned in a single genre. And we also add genre, calendar month of release, and year of release fixed effects. In our second set of analysis, we aim to understand which games are used by critics as referent. This is another probit regression at the game level that looks forward in time. Is this game mentioned in the review of another game that was released on a later date? We again control for novelty, distinctiveness, boundary spanning, and the various fixed effects. Here we also control for whether a game received critical acclaim when it was reviewed and whether it was a relative top seller in terms of its downloads on the Steam platform. In our third set of analyses, we consider the universe of potential pairings between games, and we try to predict which pairs of games are indeed formed through a critic's comparisons. We can set up the model either as a conditional logit, where we condition on a focal game being compared, or as a two-way fixed effects model, where we can relax this criterion. We model the outcome as a function of how similar pairs of games are as measured by their tags, the extent that their genres overlap, and the time in between both games' releases. We control for game-level features either through controls or through two-way fixed effects. Then, finally, in our fourth set of analyses, we look at how being compared affects the focal game's evaluation. Here we exploit the fact that many games are reviewed on both GameSpot and IGN, but are only compared on one of the two sites. This allows us to run a game fixed effects regression with a game's review score as the outcome. We control for whether the review contained any mention or whether a comparison was positive, negative, or neutral from the perspective of the focal game. We also control for the overall sentiment of the review, as well as reviewer fixed effects in addition to the earlier mentioned game fixed effects. Let's take a look at our main findings. First, although there are many factors that predict which games get reviewed in the first place, there are hardly any factors that predict which games get compared, if we just looked at those games in isolation. This suggests that while publishers can influence the decision of a game being reviewed by critics, they cannot influence a critic's decision to compare their products to one another. Second, we find that critics are more likely to mention games that are innovative or based on new IP, games that are top performing in terms of their downloads on the platform, and games that have received critical claims from critics themselves. In other words, games that are exemplars or best-in-class offerings are most likely to be top of mind with reviewers and therefore are more often mentioned. Third, when we study the intersection of two games, we find that critics are more likely to compare games that have greater similarity in terms of their product features and genres. Thus, when two products are similar and the prior product is an exemplar, then it becomes more likely that they will get compared. And finally, we find that being compared doesn't necessarily affect the game's evaluation by a critic. However, when we break out the comparisons by their valence, we find that negative comparisons strongly suppress review scores and ultimately negatively impact a game's downloads on Steam. Most comparisons are negative, and we do not find an equally robust results for positive comparisons in the opposite direction. We believe that our study makes a couple of potentially important contributions to our understanding of information intermediaries and optimal distinctiveness. One of the main implications of our work concerns firms' positioning strategies, particularly as it relates to exemplars. Prior work on optimal distinctiveness suggests that firms should position their products closely to exemplars in the market. By being similar to these best-in-class offerings, or so the argument goes, new entrants can ride their coattails by borrowing some of their inherent legitimacy. It is also often assumed that this process of identifying two-product similarity and the resulting transfer of legitimacy is indeed mediated by external audiences such as information intermediaries, but this link has not been established empirically until now. Our work suggests a somewhat opposite dynamic, in that new products that are similar to exemplars are indeed at greater risk of being compared, but that this comparison more often than not will negatively reflect on the new entrant. Exemplars are innovative, they've received critical acclaim, and they've achieved superior sales performance. It is very likely that new entrants aren't at the same level, and that therefore any comparison between them and an exemplar will negatively reflect on the new product. Therefore, our study cautions against flying too close to the sun. Firms should carefully consider modeling their products after exemplars, as this may result in negative comparisons, and they might get burned. Thank you for listening, and feel free to get in touch with either myself or with Richard if you have any questions or comments.